Welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this second event in the series. I'm only here just to say that the series is being delivered by 3 organisations. So we have the Oxford Trust, which owns 2 amazing innovation centres in Oxfordshire, the Wood Centre here and the Oxford Centre for Innovation, which is an iconic building in the middle of Oxford. We have Barclays Eagle Labs. We have Nikki and Matt from Barclays Eagle Labs, who have spaces within both of those centres. And then I'm from Oxford Innovation, and what we do is we actually manage the centres. And I'm also talking on behalf of 8 centres in Oxfordshire who've all contributed towards this. Probably absolutely enough from me. I'd like to hand over to Malin, who's going to introduce the speakers and the topic.
So thanks for joining us today. Last time we met, we talked about an exit. So if you remember what we talked about last time, this is the sort of event series that's been turned on its head. So we started with exit. What do you need to do before you exit? You need to scale. And this is the topic that we'll be covering today with our lovely speakers that I'm now going to introduce. We've got Babita starting off. Is Babita joining us online? Or? Yeah. Great. Good. We know where people are. And she's going to talk you through what do you need to do when you think about scaling if you weren't in the business. Imagine if you took yourself out. That's what's going to happen when you exit. What strategies and thoughts do you need to have in place to make that happen? So, followed by Babita will be Cheryl, who'll talk to you about people strategy. Then we've got Deborah, who's here with us live today to talk a little bit about change management, followed by Tracy, who will talk about cash flow. They will all tell you more about themselves and their journeys to get here. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time as I hand over to Babita.
My name is Babita Devi. I'm the Innovation Director at the Epicenter in Haverhill, so one of Oxford Innovation's network of centres around the UK. And I do that role part-time, and I also am a coach for the Judge Business School and the Accelerate programme, and I'm also a coach for the Barclays Eagle Lab. So I work with a lot of businesses in this space, a lot of organisations that are looking to grow and to scale up their businesses. I was hoping for a little bit of audience participation today, but that's not going to happen. So I will go straight into it. So I guess the main thing for me was to just really try and understand, how many businesses here are actually looking to scale versus those that are actually in that process already. And one of the big, a few big challenges that I quite often see founders actually go through when they start this process is that very quickly they can become quite overwhelmed with the growth that their company is going through. And then also alongside that is to create infrastructure to actually help set them up for growth as well. And so the overwhelm also then can be filtered down. And I know that Cheryl's going to be talking about people today, but that whole process that the organisation is going through and sometimes can be quite alienating as well for the employees. So it's really important that to set up processes, almost like set up as you mean to go on. And there's kind of a bit of a sweet spot, I think, in terms of company size when everything just really takes off and it almost it's like a step change between having a lot of control with the way things are done to almost overnight you get into this place where suddenly there's a lot more people involved, you're scaling quite quickly, and that can be either internally because you've raised investment, or it could be externally because suddenly the market's taken off and you're having to service quite a large market. So I guess one of the things I'd really like you to do is to just imagine a scenario that as you go through that process, rather than be overwhelmed, is imagine going through that process with a level of clarity and also that everyone in your organization is on the same page in terms of the direction that the business is taking. And that's really about setting your business up now and future-proofing your business now so that it's set up for the future. The things that I always encourage people to think about when they're going through this are, there's three things specifically, there are more, but the three, if you like, the starting point is around people, as I said, Cheryl's going to touch on that, product. And when I say product, I'm talking about not just the product or service that you're supplying into the market today, but also future-proofing your product development going into the future in terms of what the market's actually going to need as well. And then the third piece, which is really the piece that I'm talking about today, is around process. And this piece actually is quite often overlooked. And the reason it's overlooked is because you can have processes in your business that just work, and they just kind of, they tick you over, and they can be quite created in, if you like, in silos, where you have each department doing kind of managing their function, and sometimes there can be lack of integration across the departments. But the most important thing around process, and in fact, I would say there's three specific things. One is around documentation. The second is around communication, and the third piece is around implementation. And I'll just take a few minutes to talk about each of those in turn. So with documentation, quite often when we are a smaller company, and by smaller I'm talking about less than 30 people, we quite often allow our processes around documentation just to evolve from where we started within our company. And that can be localized. I mean, to take a very specific example, that could be managing documents in a very localized way rather than in a shared way. And the challenge with this is that it starts to, as a company starts to grow, it starts to create inefficiencies in the system. And so rather than have your business, I mean, this is something that can be implemented straight away. It doesn't matter what size your business is, but you can almost create a level of efficiency in the way that you're managing your documentation. And I guess the way to check that you've done that effectively is to remove people out of the business and see whether somebody could step into their shoes and just take over with the tasks that they're doing. And so it's a really good way just to understand whether you've actually covered every part of the process, and that everything in your business is actually documented. In fact, it's quite a step change for most business owners to go through that process of growth themselves as individuals, when there's that transition point when they no longer are the business. The business is a separate entity and they are working inside the business. And so going through and creating the documentation around each of the processes within your business really helps you to take a step out of your company. And actually it allows you also to assess the processes that you're using as well and see whether they're the most efficient for what you want to do. The second piece is around communication. And it's one of the biggest challenges that as a company starts to grow, people sometimes struggle to see where they fit into that process. You know, we've all probably read books around how to maintain culture and innovation in culture, especially as you start to scale. And it is one of the most challenging things to do. You very quickly move from being in the same office and reading visual cues and you know, really knowing the people around you, to suddenly becoming quite digital in your approach, you know, so having Slack groups and WhatsApp groups and trying to manage projects through project management software. And with all of that, it's really important that you still find a way to implement that human side around what your business is about. As you start to grow on that journey of growth, it can become quite isolating for some members of the team because they're so used to working as part of a team, and then suddenly they become almost a function in their own right that can become siloed quite quickly. So really important to focus on communication. And then the last piece is really around implementation. And I always think that the software industry has done a really good job around this, where most of you will be familiar with an agile way of working. And the thing I love about that whole Scrum model is the fact that it's almost encouraging that communication through a process on a regular basis. And with Scrum meetings that are taking place every 2 weeks, it really gives people to connect and evaluate what's going on and move quickly towards the goal of the company. And within that as well, it gives employees, it gives your staff an opportunity to really feed into processes. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from the IT space. I was coaching a company this morning who's actually has just started their journey. They are just approaching 30 people now, had about £6 million worth of investment. So they're on that trajectory to scale quite quickly. And a lot of their systems have always been quite localized. And so one of their big changes that they're going through and will be making in the near future is how to move from their current infrastructure to ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, which is to really create systems within the business to join up the various departments so that everything becomes, there's much more flow between what's happening with each of those different functions of the business. So I guess to wrap up, what I would say is scaling and growing it's such a big challenge anyway for the business owners, and there's all sorts of challenges that come along with that in terms of, is it sustainable? Is there longevity with what we're doing as we start to grow our teams? Are we going to be able to get the right people into fit the right roles? But outside of all of that as well, I guess right now, today, if you're a company that's planning to grow and to scale, one of the easiest things to do in the very early stages is to look at processes and make sure that all your processes are really tight, and so that as you start to scale, you're already set up for that growth. And that's it from me. Yeah. I think I've taken up my 10 minutes already, or have I gone over? I'm sorry.
Babita, thank you very, very much. I think we'll just give you a bit of a round of applause, whether you can hear it or not.
Thank you very much for welcoming me on this session about scaling up. As you may have read, I will cover the aspect of people and why am I really sort of passionate and best placed to do this? Well, I've done 20 years in HR, working for companies like Virgin Atlantic, and then moved into the space of kind of more startups and SMEs. So I saw one of my organisations go through starting with 35 people and then scaling up to 200 by the time I'd left. And they had an office in the US, in Australia, in India, and also the UK. So I have seen all the sort of growing pains and the cracks that come. A little bit is mentioned already, kind of scaling up is about having the foundations in place. And I guess the one thing that surprises me is always when people sort of start out and leaders start out on their journey and start up, there's always the marketing, the product, how to acquire customers, how to think about the IT infrastructure. But what I consistently find is people seem to come quite a bit further on down that journey. And are often thought about at the point that you need more people. And by then, you're at a point where you're possibly firefighting and you're firefighting people issues, but also having the challenge that you're then trying to put this infrastructure in place around people, a little bit like was touched on with regards to kind of processes, and also thinking about the systems you need and the skills you need. And it's almost like that's too late. So if you're thinking about it now as you're on your journey scaling up, now's the time to think about that particular pillar and the framework that you need to put in place around that. So some of the leaders that I've worked with, they've sort of highlighted some of the problems that I hear is that they spend a lot of time working, in their business rather than on their business, and they're getting drawn into people issues, and they perhaps have high staff turnover already, or they have promoted people into managers to look after people, and they were excellent at doing their functional job, but they haven't really had any support or time to develop these people to be able to do really well managing their teams and managing their people. And as a result of that, you get that lack of engagement, and you get that kind of disjointed. Talked a little bit about the communication. This is a change for people, and you have to take them through that journey of change when you're scaling up. You've got to signpost it. You've got to keep communicating and be transparent about why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise, it does lead to, you know, people problems, if you like. So why wait? You know, why wait until this sort of happens? Why not put some things in place just to sort of head that off? So a little bit about me and scaling up. So recently, one of the organisations I've worked with have been around that. They were raising the problem being, you know, they had people that were in management positions that didn't, you know, that weren't effective, just not their fault, but just hadn't had the training or the support that they needed. And also getting talent into the business. It's a really, really tight labour market, you know, hearing organisations again and again saying how difficult it is to recruit people into their organisations. So I came in and started to work with the CEO with 50 staff. There hadn't been a people role before, and that was something that I worked with him, listening to the organisation, so listening to the line managers, listening to the people, listening to the CEO about really what is the problem, what is it we need to solve here. So what I worked on and we put forward was raising the employer brand. So how can we do that? You know, how can we kind of tap into the passive market more? How can we tell the story about the people? There's nothing that people like more that when they're watching your organizations and they're kind of sitting on the sidelines, maybe thinking, what's that really like to work there? You know, tell that story, tell the people journey, let your people talk for themselves. You know, what are their roles like? What's it like? What's the culture like working there? And celebrate your successes, but also talk about things that you need to get better at, you know, things you need to improve. That's really vital as well. And the other part to it was upskilling people managers. So that was through a series of workshops, thinking about, you know, how do they manage? What do they know about themselves? You know, where are their strengths? Where do they find their challenges? And how can they understand that and tap into their people to bring out the best in them and have really rich, what I would call coaching conversations? So that's where you're asking questions, not just about the task at hand, but you're talking about people's careers, talking about what's important to them, really motivating them and making sure that they have a clear understanding what the goals are for the organization. And they're part of that puzzle, how they're going to help the organization to get there. And the output of that was, you know, seeing the change, seeing our brand awareness, you know, increase. We did some lives, for example, where we kind of pulled back the curtain and let people and the audience see what the organization was like and ask the CEO questions, but also people that were in the roles themselves to really understand the culture. So as I mentioned before, it also opened offices in the US and Australia. So that's also something that I've done in a scaling up capacity, and that as well brings its challenges. But I think most important, one of the areas that I've also supported is just making sure you have a trusted thought partner. It's really, really lonely journey otherwise. You know, as leaders, you started this, you know what you want the product to be, you know who your customers are, you know who you want to sell to, but often you don't have somebody that you can just bounce ideas off of or think about when you might be procrastinating and why that is, what's holding you back. And so creating that space as well and having somebody that you can talk that through with is really, really important in this journey of kind of scaling up, because it can be very overwhelming. I think it was mentioned earlier, isn't it? You know, there's lots of things that possibly you haven't experienced before, and you can feel quite isolated. So it's also looking after yourself. So some of the things I've already mentioned, just sort of making sure that we've got the pillars in place. So around your processes, around your communications, around your systems, and around the skills you want. So not just the skills you have and need now, but what you're going to need in the future. And sometimes it's a really good opportunity when you come to scale up to actually look at your organization and think about the people you've got in it already. You know, who there is showing potential, who there could you develop? Because it might well be that you could get a skill that you need easier external to the organization in another part, and you bring on somebody that's already in your business that has the capability or the capacity or the potential to go on and do something quite different. So those conversations are really important. Self-awareness is really important as a leader, just to understand and how to lead authentically, to make sure that you know what your culture to look like, to make sure that that comes through in the policies that you put in place. So when I talk about policies, it's about the right policies at the right time and making sure that they really speak to your people and they really understand them, you know, and it's something that they can really connect with. So imagine when, you know, you've got all those pillars in place, you're scaling up, you've thought about it in advance, and now you've got a team that are working really effectively. You've got people who are really motivated, and they are your ambassadors of your business. So if they're motivated and they're engaged and they're fulfilled, the rest will take care of itself. I know you hear people say that time and again, but it really is true. And what that allows for you as leaders of your organization is to really have that space and time to think and work on your business rather than getting drawn into the everyday and drawn into the weeds and the detail, which distracts you really from your direction and where you want to go. So some top tips to sort of leave you with. Put people at the heart of what you do. You know, they are a central pillar to your business. They are the ambassadors of your business. Have a clear direction and share your story, your people story, you know, and remember why you started doing what you do. That's really important. And people want to know what you're about. Treat hiring people similar to customer acquisition. You know, as I've mentioned earlier, sometimes there's people watching your organization for a long time in the background, and they're thinking, is that someone I want to work? And so the more you can sort of tell them about what it's like and the experience there, the more likely you'll find that you'll recruit people that align with what you're about. And that is something that's really, really powerful, because then they come and they're going to be fulfilled and feel like it's a space that they can really grow. Make sure you invest in your people, you know, consider what skills are needed now and in the future. Make sure you have policies that align with the culture you want, and essentially have a thought partner for yourself that you can talk through your ideas, actions, and any blocks that you're experiencing. If you're procrastinating on something, there'll be a reason for it. So ask yourself why. Why are you not moving forward with that? And how can you kind of break through so that you're not sort of stopping and procrastinating on things? So thanks very much. I think that's probably my time up. But if those are any of the challenges that I've mentioned that you think you'd like to have a discussion with me about, then please get in touch. I would love to talk them through with you. And there is definitely a way that we can work towards solving those for you and helping you with those. So thank you.
Cheryl, I hope you can hear me, but if you can't, we're all going to give you a big round of applause anyway. So thank you very much.
So I've got the fortunate slot of managing change for you. So good afternoon, thank you all for turning up, and for those that are online. I just want to tell you first of all that there's a lot of information in these slides. I am not intending to read it all through. Do not worry when you look at the slides and you think that is the slide of death. It really isn't. I've tried to give you a toolkit to manage change for your future. And your future business as you're upscaling. If you would like the slides after this, they will, the people that are organising and your contacts will send them through to you. And I'm happy, you know, obviously to share that with you. So there's content on there that you can refer back to later. But I will quickly go through it for you so that you can get an idea of things and questions obviously at the end. So that's our agenda. My name is Deborah McCormack. I do organisational change, people strategy and culture. My background is I'm a business psychologist. I've worked in large-scale, complex, transformational change for about 26 years, but I have worked with smaller organisations all the way up to the larger organisations. My most recent role was with GSK, where I was a global lead for change management, working on their third-party vendor selection and risk management. And I am now at the moment working at Allen & Overy on a different change management project, which I can talk about later if anybody wants to hear about it. Worked in various sectors, had a great time, enjoyed myself. But for you guys, let's focus on you and what you guys want to know. Obviously, when you're wanting to upscale your business, you're wanting to sell, you're wanting to look to exit, to sell it, you want to be selling it at a good growth trajectory. You want to be showing that your finances are looking so good that somebody just wants to come in and buy it. Potentially that might be one of your exit strategies. The types of change that you might be experiencing, there's 3 different types of change that you go through. One is developmental change, one is transitional change, and one is transformational change. You can see from the diagrams, just to give you a bit of a depiction of that, it's like A to B, or you're going along a transitional change into a new state. The transformational change, which is typically where I sit, goes like this, it goes back to front, it goes everywhere, it goes up and it goes down and it goes around. This is the type of change and the change approach that you can come back and read a little bit more about, but this slide will show you how you recognise it in your business. So am I experiencing developmental change? Well, developmental change is very low pain. So for developmental change, it often results in the change approach of a training, people coming in, upskilling you, teaching you a new system, IT system. And the management focus is really that you as the business owner want to improve skills so that they can use the IT system. But when you get to transitional change, that's low to moderate pain. It's more of a review. Are we doing the right thing? Are we going in the right direction? Are we redesigning our processes? And then what do we need to do? What's the management focus there? And that's about systems and processes, technology. Not typically looking at culture at that point. Transitional change, not really culture, but transformational change tends to look at high pain. It is cultural change. It is, you're talking about changing partnership behaviour, for example, at a law firm. Things that aren't easy to do, but you navigate it and you try and get around. And as I said, it's quite cyclical. See if I can just do this with a 1. No, right. So types of change that you might be having on your plate. So if you're looking to scale at the moment, you might be looking at systems change, technology change, process, customers, people, policies, finance, but guaranteed you guys are going to go through some kind of change because you have to. I mean, life is just one big change, but even though you know your vision, your direction, where you want to go, do the people who are working with you, are they on the same page? Do they want to go on that same journey? Or do they think maybe that's not the right thing? Have you got a shared vision, shared values, and that they're all coming along with you on the journey? And I think sometimes as leaders, we all forget that our vision maybe isn't shared and people don't know what's in our head. So there's loads of different sorts of change journeys. You may have seen the Kubler-Ross model. Has anybody seen the Kubler-Ross model? One person. Has anybody, do you know ADKAR? People heard about ADKAR? One of you, fabulous. So the Kubler-Ross change curve was actually created by a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back in around about 1969, I think it was. And it was around about she was looking at behaviours about bereavement. But actually you can extrapolate this and put this into any type of change that people are going through. And this is a very standard change management model that I'm trying to impart to you so that you can give people a common language for managing through change. This is really useful with your team if you want to say, okay, well, we're going to do this change, and then people say, oh, I don't want to. I like my system, especially IT systems. We all get a bit, excited about change, but when it actually comes to managing a new IT system, you put in a new CRM system or something like that, people don't like it. They have to learn something new. It's uncomfortable. And they go through this curve, which is around feeling the frustration, dealing with a bit of a depression. This was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross for bereavement. But genuinely, you can see a depression within the business, and that will affect productivity. How you are managing your staff at that time is so important because you have to take them on the journey so that your business doesn't falter. You don't get hang on a minute, customer, I've got to do this CRM system and I hate it, kind of thing. So you need to be managing it the best that you can. And then that starts to get people to excel and accept the change and integrate and become a lot more agile in your business because you've implemented something. So that's the Kubler-Ross. People can get stuck. That's really important. So they can get stuck between like the frustration and they could go back and forth between denial and frustration. No, this isn't really happening. Oh, I hate it. No, it's not really happening. So they can get stuck on the curve. But the curve is really a function of time, in that people have to go through it in their own way. You are not all going to experience this curve in the same way. You as leaders will be up to the integration part way before the rest of your team, who might still be sitting in denial. And it's about giving people the respect that their journey is very different to yours. They're on an individual level. And as a leader, it might feel personal, but it often isn't about you. People will always blame the leader. Oh, they're doing this to us. I hate it. Why did he say that? Why is she doing it? I don't like it. And it can feel really personal. And you just, as a leader, have to remember, actually, this is them going through that curve, and it's not about me necessarily. Yeah, so like synchronized for me, you can't expect everybody to be doing everything at the same time. This is the ADKA change management model. I won't go into this in too much detail, just be aware that it's a model that you can refer back to. It's basically saying that if you have to do each one of these steps, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and then reinforcement. And there is good evidence to say if you miss one of these steps when you're implementing change, it will fail. It's a good one for you guys to come back to and have another look at. There's a lot on Google you can find about ADKA. Here, this is Kotter's 8 Steps for Leading Change. So this is a psychological model from John Kotter. And basically he says, you identify the reasons for change, you build a guiding coalition, you develop your vision, so similar to what Cheryl was just talking about, you create your short-term wins, make the change stick, accelerate and consolidate, you communicate for buy-in, and you remove barriers. I've gone about that the wrong way, it's this way, I beg your pardon. Removing barriers is really important, that's the job of a leader. You are there not to do the job, to unblock problems for people. And actually that's a really lovely part of being a leader, is feeling, that is where you should be sitting. I'm unblocking those problems for those people. What? Oh, I've got a nice wavy screen. I'm getting smiled at from the back there. So so I'm unblocking those barriers for people. See if you can still make it wavy when I go to the next one. So this is leaders and the team. This is the Lencioni one, which is basically saying that as a leader, you've got to build trust and that, why have we got to have a shared vision and a mission? And if you don't do these things, what happens? So if you don't have trust, then there's no vulnerability and people aren't happy to make mistakes, go forward and experiment within business. If you've got conflict, if you've got conflict in the business, with the vision and the mission, then you get this artificial harmony. You're not really going towards the right path together. If you have involvement and people are bought into the vision and mission, then that's great. But if you don't, then they have uncertainty. They're not sure what's happening. And likewise, you can go up. And if you've got the results, then that's great. But if you don't, then ego and status comes in and people start wanting, but I'm good and feeling threatened and worried about things. Managing change, so comparing to the waterfall method to the agile method. So has anybody heard about the agile? Got 2 nods, fabulous. So the waterfall method tends to be quite the old way of doing things, very linear. In terms of how you manage change and project management. But when you look at the agile, it's really about this discovery, design, develop and deploy. And Babita was talking about sprints and scrums. So scrums are something that happens in agile methodology. There's a whole host of stuff out there for you guys to research on in terms of scrums and sprints. But the agile methodology is basically saying that you don't do one big long transformational change. You break it down, break your project into smaller, not like 8-9 week blocks, and you discover what you want to do, you design it, you develop it, you do it, and you start to have smaller wins along the way. And what happens when you do that is you you don't get that change fatigue. You know, oh, it's been going on for such a long time, and people see the benefit of doing it in short wins. Process steps. So here we go. Oh, this is a lot of, you can read this another time, but basically these are some steps that typically we would be doing as change managers. You help leaders define the vision. You understand the benefits and the value. These are all in the bold, they're the outputs. So you would have a stakeholder strategy, stakeholder mapping. There's change methodology. You choose the change methodology that works for you. You agree your RACI. I'll show you an example of a RACI in a minute. You create your comms and engagement plan. You can look at a change impact assessment. So is this actually worth our time and effort in doing this? And there are ways that you can monitor that going forward. Are we ready for the change? And then you start planning the change out. So there's a big PMO kind of area in that. You can prepare for resistance. So on large scale transformational change, often it's very difficult to get each person around the globe kind of wanting to do the same thing. What education and upskilling is required? How are you going to sustain the change? And are you and your team ready to lead the change? So this is, RACI is a really good way to assign responsibilities, accountabilities, support, to talk about who should be consulted on the change and who should be informed. If you haven't come across a RACI before, I'd be quite surprised. But RACIs are really good in terms of managing change. It holds people accountable, and it's really good for a PMO to be able to go back and say, when was that decision made and who did it and why? And it's just a good way to log that. This is really simple, but it's helped, and I use it on every single project. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 5-person business or 100, 200, 300,000 person business. Cover your bases with comms. So passive comms versus active comms. So the passive would be a poster in your hallway versus active would be a questionnaire they actually have to go and fill out versus something physical, which again, I suppose would be a poster, but it might be an event that you're holding, focus groups where you actually have to turn up to it versus the virtual, virtual event, where people are attending via screens. And you can have something in each of these boxes. So you would have an active virtual, for example, would be an online questionnaire. A passive virtual would be something, watching a video. You don't have to do anything, you kind of almost have it on in the background. A physical active would be attending an event, a focus group, workshops, and the physical passive would be that kind of poster thing. And having something in each of those boxes as you're going through change just really helps make sure that you've covered all the different representational systems, types. And a word from Jeff, we love a bit of Jeff. The only sustainable advantage you can have over others is agility. That's it. You're always going to change. It's how you deal with that change, and it's making sure that your organisation is agile enough to adjust to where you're going in the future. You are constantly monitoring, constantly measuring, and making sure that you are adjusting and changing as you go, and that you know that the changes you're putting in place make sense right now, next week, in a month's time, but also maybe in a year's time. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Sorry.
I'm the Smart Finance Director, and I'm the founder of the Smart Finance team. And I've been asked to talk to you about cash flow for growth. So I'm going to bet that everybody, in fact, I'm going to bet this packet of Smarties, that everybody in this room, or pretty much most of you in this room, have heard that cash is king. As a finance director, I'm also going to say to you that revenue is vanity, that profit is sanity, but cash is reality. So you've just got an amazing new contract, £25,000. Congratulations, that's amazing. Here, have some Smarties to celebrate. Your revenue is going to look amazing this month. But how are you going to deliver that contract? Do you have the team in place that you need? Do you have to get some training in? Do you have to train your team up? Maybe you need to buy something. Are you actually going to make some profit out of this contract? I'm going to take it a step further. Cash is the reality. What if the customer doesn't pay? What if it takes 4 months for them to pay you? Maybe they don't pay you at all. How are you going to pay your staff? How are you going to pay for the products that you've bought to service this contract? And how are you going to invest in your business, your growing business? So, cash is reality. So what you can see here, I'm going to try this. So this line here is 0, and what you have across the bottom of periods, it can be quarters, it can be months, it could be years, but typically you look at this in months or maybe quarters. And you can see the profit line is increasing wonderfully. So you're doing really well on your profit. Oh, sorry, that's your revenue line. That's your vanity line. Fantastic. Your profit line, yeah, that's going up. It takes a little while. It takes you to get into period 3 before your revenue, your profit starts to increase. But what's happening to your cash? Your cash flow, you're going to need to find something close to, let's say, £20,000 in period 4. Did you know that? Are you ready for that? So what you need to do is actually understand it. It's really important that you understand your cash flow and what's behind it. So obviously, profit is really important. You understand that you're making a profitable deal. It's worth doing. But from a cash perspective, you've also got to understand debtor days. So by that, I mean, how many days does it take for your customers and your clients to pay you? Is it 30 days? Is it 15 if you're lucky? Or maybe it's 90 days before they're going to pay you. Creditors' days? How much credit do you have? Is it 30 days before you have to pay your suppliers? If you're a small growing business and you're startup mode, you know, you're going to be quite lucky to get any credit. You might, you know, that's quite rare. They want people to pay up front before they'll provide you with goods or services if you haven't been trading for very long. And if you're selling diagnostic equipment or small, let's say widgets, how many do you need to have in your stock so that you can send them out to your clients in a reasonable time so they're going to be happy with your service? What investments do you need to make to help your business grow, and how much and when? So you need to understand all of these things before you can understand your cash flow. You want to look at different scenarios. You want to have a clear plan that you can buy into. Don't be too ambitious, but you need to understand the best case scenario. But you also need to think about the worst case scenario. You may have one key customer that's bringing all of your revenue and profit in. What are you going to do if you lose that customer? If you've got a plan in place to act quickly and you know the effects that that's going to have on your business, you can take some of the emotion out and you can make decisions. You can make better decisions. What's your burn rate? Do you have alternative supply chain? If you've got any issues with supply chain, we've heard a lot about that in the news recently. And the key here is if you understand your cash flow, you can take some action before it's too late. I mentioned burn rate earlier. Typically, investors refer to this. Now, I'm not really expecting you to take cash and burn it, but what they really mean here is if you take out any extraordinary investments that you need to make, how much cash are you burning? How much cash are you using on a monthly basis? And in this case, it's just over, let's say, £32,000. It's really handy to have an understanding of where you're spending it. You know, are you spending it in the right places for your stage of business growth? That's what is meant by burn rate. And you might come across the term cash runway. So going back to the example we had earlier, you've got, let's say, 3 quarters or 3 months in this example before you run out of cash, and you've got to find that 20k. So your cash runway is 3 months. So if you understand that, you can start to do something about it now rather than waiting until period 3 and thinking, oh dear, I need to find £20,000. I was told not to forget that I've got a mic on and not say something I shouldn't. So investors want to have confidence that you have good control and that you've got good governance over your business's cash and that you understand your cash flow and you've got the maturity to be forward thinking as a leader of your business. So good cash management, there are a number of things, as I've said earlier, that you need to consider. You really want to have your bank reconciled. Don't leave it to the end of the year and give it to your accountant at the end of the year to do. You need to be doing these monthly. You need to be clear on what's happening and be 100% confident you know that your bank is reconciling. Credit control. I mentioned earlier how many days it takes for your customers to pay you. If you've got good credit control processes in place, and that starts when you sign your customer up and you've got good terms and conditions for that client. It's not just about chasing the invoice after you've sent it. It's the whole journey. If you've got good credit control, you're going to have better cash management. Stock control. Don't invest in millions of widgets and stick them in your garage because you think you're going to get a 10% discount. It's really important that you've got an understanding of how much stock you need when. And your supply chain, I've mentioned, it can be risky if you've just got one area, one way of getting your supply chain managed. You need to have alternatives. And clearly you need to know how much you want to invest, where you want to invest to grow your business. So these are all important levers you need to understand and the effect of those on your cash flow, if anything, is going to change. So if you've got cash, you are able to take advantage of opportunities that might come along. And I was talking to an angel investor last week, and he was saying he's advising all of the people that he's talking to at the moment, if you've got the opportunity, get the cash in now. So you want to get some finance ducks in a row before you approach investors. You want to have a clear plan for your business that you can translate into financial projections. That'll help you understand when you need the cash, so the cash runway, and it'll help you understand how much you need. So as I say, you need to understand your cash runway and don't leave it too late. Typically, if you're trying to raise a significant amount of money, you're going to need 9 months, maybe 12 months to get that. Finance ducks again. So consider your options. We've got equity, loans, although typically that can be quite difficult. So, if you're a startup, grants, so they're non-diluting. It's obviously a good option. Working capital finance. So depending on what your business is, you may be able to raise money from those client invoices that you've raised, and I mentioned earlier, and get that cash in early. You could work in partnership with someone who would provide services in lieu of some equity or something like that. So you can work in partnerships. Asset finance for any large equipment you might need. And there's the original friends and family if you're in startup position. But you need to consider the options and the costs, and they're all different. So I'm leading and building the Smart Finance team, and we have a foundational virtual finance team that will support growing businesses, really, and take away a lot of the hassle that helps you manage those types of things. You know, all of the services like credit control, invoice processing that you need to do. And it's really important to get that good, solid foundation. And then we've also got a team of finance directors and finance leaders that you can draw on the skills that you need as and when you need them. So you can get access to all of those skill sets that you need. And I'm looking to work with businesses who operate a lean business model. They're at the stage of growth where they know they need better financial management in their business. But we do it in a flexible way. So you you pay for what you need when you need it, and it allows you to grow into your virtual finance team and your finance team. And typically it's technical businesses who want to keep the key skills that they need for their businesses in-house, those key skills relating directly to their USP, and are looking to work with a trusted partner who have expertise in financial management. So if anybody's interested in hearing a little bit more, wants to have a chat, come and see me. I think these slides are going to be shared, so there's some contact details there. But if you want to take a card and get in touch, I've got more Smarties here if anybody would like to have them. Thank you.
Wendy and I had to have a little check-in. Well, we at this stage, we just want to say thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining us, Babita and Cheryl, if you're still with us, Tracy and Deborah. Please come back and join us then when we take another step back in the process on business development and customer acquisition. So hopefully as many of you as possible will be able to join us then, either here in person or online. And without further ado, thank you so much. And sandwiches are available in the lobby together with nice drinks and refreshments. Thanks again.